For the second time now this year, we woke up on a Sunday morning to find federal agents had raided a party before dawn, detaining dozens of people before turning them over to immigration enforcement. This time it happened in Colorado Springs at what law enforcement is calling an illegal underground nightclub. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Jennifer Meckles. We're still working to learn more about this situation, like how many people are still in custody, how many people have been charged, and what charges they're facing. Here's what we do know tonight. This started around 3:45 this morning at this building in Colorado Springs. A special agent at Rocky Mountain DEA says it has been the site of violent crime, prostitution, drug trafficking. We are told more than 200 people were inside when that raid began, and DEA agents detained more than 100 of them who they claim are in the country without proper authorization.
From there, we were escorted down with handcuffs, making sure that we were U.S. residents. My assurance is that I was a U.S. resident. They ran my record, made sure that I had no criminal record history, and then from there they just let me go as if nothing happened.
The DEA says it was not just people in the country without authorization. They say some people were also arrested on outstanding warrants overnight. The DEA says more than a dozen active duty military were also inside that building at the time of the raid. In some cases, they were attending the party. In others, they were working security. The Army Criminal Investigation Division is now working with the DEA to determine next steps. Worth noting, back in January, the DEA led a raid in Adams County. In that case, they took 49 people into custody, and ICE said at the time at least 41 were in the country without authorization. The DEA says they seized drugs and weapons. 9 News Investigates eventually learned that the raid resulted in no state and no criminal federal charges filed against anyone who was taken into custody. Let's talk about your forecast for a minute. Warm today, windy. We were under a high fire danger kind of day, and we caught that wind really whipping through some trees in Jefferson County. 9 News weather impact meteorologist Corey Reppenhagen joins us tonight. I think we got out unscathed with the fire danger today, which was your big concern.
Yeah, it looks like it. We had no reports of any major fire starts, which is great because those fires would have run in the grass pretty easy in those winds today. So good news there. Temperatures were very warm today. Almost all of us were able to experience some of this. 82 degrees here in the Denver metro area, 91 in Lamar, 87 in Pueblo. So the eastern half of the state really kind of showing off a little bit here with some summer-like weather here. Look at this quiet Sunday night here at Spear and Logan, where it is 66 degrees at 9 News Studios, 59 at Denver International Airport. So a mild night here. And this spinny thing out here, this is a mid-latitude cyclone spinning out in the Great Basin. That's going to change our weather up a little bit here going through the next few days with some cooler temperatures and some elevated rain chances. Tomorrow we'll have a little bit of a cool down into the 60s here with some rain chances throughout. I'll talk about those coming up in just a few minutes.
Okay, Corey, thank you. Aurora police are investigating 2 separate overnight shootings. One left a man dead and injured 2 other people. The first shooting happened in the parking lot of the Village Green Plaza Shopping Center around 2:15. 2 men were taken to the hospital with injuries. One of them later died. Police have not identified any suspects. And that second shooting happened about an hour later on Highline Place, north of Alameda. Man was shot, taken to the hospital with life-threatening injuries. And police say multiple people were detained, including the person they believe to be the shooter. Police say everybody involved in this particular shooting knew each other, and there have not been any arrests so far. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and tonight, organizations that work to support survivors are really facing a funding crisis made even worse by cuts from the Department of Justice. 9 News reporter Rachel Krause joins us now to show us how advocates say these cuts are really only the latest to come down. Rachel.
Yeah, victim services funding for many organizations here in Colorado are funded from a number of federal grants and programs. Grants that seem to be disappearing. And now the DOJ is cutting hundreds of grants, wiping out funding that helps victims of crime. That's left organizations worrying how they'll be able to support survivors.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
It's been a frustrating few days for Bree Franklin, executive director at the Colorado Coalition Against Sexual Assault. She got word this week that the DOJ is slashing grant funding for crime victims.
I think a lot of folks are feeling very stressed out and under pressure, worrying about what's going to happen, and that if all of the various funding streams through the federal government get cut off, there might be a very abrupt closing of a lot, if not all, of the victim service programs.
Programs like the one from the International Association of Nurses and the Colorado Sane Safe Project with UC Health. The program brings in out-of-state nurses from rural areas and trains them to administer SANE exams that we often call rape kits. The DOJ terminated that grant.
There's already a lack of people who've been trained and have that expertise. And now the grant that they had to train people has been cut.
We're waiting to see right now. We just don't know how it's going to trickle down.
Michelle Wiley over at the Blue Bench says their funding hasn't been cut yet, but they're waiting to see if they'll be on the DOJ's chopping block. The Blue Bench's funding is already bare bones after continued cuts federally from the Victims of Crime Act fund. Last year's 45% VOCA cut led to layoffs at the Blue Bench, a third of their staff. Wiley says they're already stretched too thin to meet survivors' needs now.
We already can't respond to the full need, just in our Denver metro community, right? So as this funding is lost, yes, our community is going to be affected by survivors and victims not having support.
The Blue Bench and KUSA, along with hundreds of providers nationwide, are joining the National Alliance to End Sexual Violence in sending a letter to Republican AG Pam Bondi. They're calling on her to restore funding for victim services, hoping to keep critical services in place for survivors.
Yeah, and I think when we get enough folks speaking up, it does make a difference.
Here in Colorado, voters approved a state supply of funding for victims of crime this past November, but collections for those funds only just started. Providers aren't expecting to see that funding likely until 2027. Rachel Krause, 9 News.
It took until day 3 for Shedeur Sanders to finally hear his name called at the NFL draft. But for one moment on day 2, he thought his wait was over. He was the victim of a prank call. And now the culprit is apologizing. Jax Ulbrich, the son of Atlanta Falcons defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich, admitted that he prank called Shedeur on Friday, pretending to be the Saints GM, telling Shedeur he'd have to wait a little longer to get drafted. Sanders bought a new phone just for the draft, so only team officials would have this number. The Falcons say Ulbrich spotted that number on his dad's iPad when he was over at his dad's house, then saved it so he could prank Shedeur later. Sanders would end up getting drafted later in the 5th round by the Cleveland Browns.